Philadelphia is steep in broadcast history. From the early pioneering days of broadcasting in the 1920s to today, Philadelphia has always been at the forefront. The Delaware Valley has been home to some of the best local programming in the country, starting with the early soap operas and children's shows to pioneering the best news formats in the country. Much of it all began right here. From radio announcers to television personalities, cameramen to directors, these were the broadcasters that burned out the airwaves. These were the pioneers of Philadelphia broadcasting.
I'm here with Gene Crane, a living legend, who's 95 years old, who spent most of his life in broadcasting, and we're doing this interview at the beautiful Bala Country Club, a club that you belonged to for years.
About 35 years, yeah.
Let's talk about your career now. How did you get started in TV?
How did I get started? Well, first was radio. There was no TV. I started in 1941, and we didn't have TV until 48. I went to work at WCAU in 46, but I had previous to that worked in Jamestown, New York, between my junior and senior years in college for a summer relief for about 3.5 months. And when I went back to Syracuse for my senior year, because of that experience, I was able to get a job at a station, WAGE, Syracuse, for the entire senior year, which was wonderful. Here I'm working, making a living, finishing my college, getting my diploma, and it all ended when a thing called World War II occurred.
You spent 4 years in the Army, right?
4 years in the Army.
Infantry.
Yeah.
Did you ever see any action?
No, thank goodness. I was never called upon. If I recall, there were 15 million of us in uniform, 5 in combat, and the other 10 we called support. I was mostly a training officer.
Back then, when you were going to Syracuse, what was your major?
Well, okay, all right. I don't tell many people this. In 1938, I started out at the College of Forestry at Syracuse University. Why? Oh, well, I know why. I was very active in scouting from age 12 to through 16. Eagle Scout, a lot of camping, a lot of time out in the woods, and somehow or other, I thought that would make forestry, which was probably the most stupid decision I ever made. I'm even surprised that my mother and father and my older brother let me do that, because I didn't want to be a forester ranger. I knew you couldn't make any money at that. I knew the only money you could make at was pulp and paper. Again, the second most stupid, because that's all chemistry. I hated chemistry. And it took me, I swear, no more than 3 months, and I remember sitting in an assembly, and you had to wear a black and red check shirt to really look like a forester. And I said, what am I doing here? And I started doing badly. And I had an opportunity to do a part. There were only 2 courses in radio. You had to major in speech and radio. One was a summary of radio. The other was direction and production. And I had a friend who was taking one of the courses, and for his senior exam, he had to do a production. He did War of the Worlds. I have moments like this with the famous, where everybody thought in New Jersey was invaded.
Oh, Orson Welles.
Orson Welles. Oh,
yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, a little before my time, but
That's all right.
I heard about it.
And he asked me if I would do it, and I did it. And the professor said, "You're good, Crane. What are you doing?" I said, "Forestry." He said, "You're what?"
So you went from Gene the Forest Ranger to Gene the TV personality.
Right.
Now, if I remember correctly, you did just about everything there was to do on TV.
Oh, absolutely.
Name some of the things that you did.
I did everything with sports. Everything with sports. What did I do in radio? And in television? TV. Well, as you know, I was an anchorman. not only my own shows, but I was John Facenda's backup for quite a number of years on the 6 and 11. I did talk shows. My wife and I, that's my first wife, David's mother, I think it was called cleverly the Mr. and Mrs. Show. We did that for 5 years. I did children's shows. I did one called Grand Chance Roundup while we were still in the radio studios on Chestnut Street. And I opened on a horse in the lobby. I could look over my shoulder and see the traffic on Chestnut Street. And here I am opening a television show live with this horse. I had to get down on the horse's neck because I had to go through 2 doors, and I really had to hit my head. And the funny part is that the poor horse, they wanted to make a horse, they wanted to rent a horse that wasn't going to be too active. And this was a sweet old mare. And the horse would get pushed into the elevator and the horse would get very nervous and immediately poop. And the poor guy, the assistant director, as we call him, he had to do the cleanup of it. And that show led to another, that was on CBS, to that same format, children performing juggling, acrobats, circus and carnival type stuff. And we did exactly the same thing, called it Candy Carnival, sold it to M&Ms, and I did that as a college barker. Hurry, hurry, hurry. And I did that for M&Ms for, I think, maybe 2 years. And when they didn't renew, they sold it to Quaker Puff Wheat and Puff Rice. And we changed the name to Contest Carnival.
I remember when I was a very young kid watching Frontier Playhouse. Were you ever on that?
No, I was never on Frontier.
Channel 10?
No, that or Action in the Afternoon. I was never, because I was busy doing another show. I was the guy Friday for a woman who was the service director for Acme Markets, and it was a half-hour cooking show. And I was her guy. You know, I helped. I did all the commercials, of course. And every once in a while, she had me do a commercial, and it was great fun. And then we had the Ritz Puppets joined us to jack up the show a little bit. And so I did. I was not a puppet. I worked with the puppets.
I remember you when I first started, and I was always amazed at your range. You could be a weatherman one day, an anchorman the next day. You could do just about anything there was to do on TV. And it was kind of you, because there was no school at that time to learn, right?
Oh, I was me. Oh, absolutely. I didn't know how, I never had to do any acting. Never. I just played myself, yeah. Which is the way television should be.
What job did you like the most?
Oh, God.
Think of all the jobs you've had.
I can't not say the Mr. and Mrs. Show, because she's still alive and might hear about it. The Candy Carnival was fun. I worked with 2 clowns, and that was great fun. One was called Candy, and the other one Carney, and the show was named Candy Carnival. I guess I enjoyed just about everything I did. Then in the declining years, I became the seniors correspondent, and I was doing material for seniors. Interesting, I found I had a half-hour talk show called Over 50, and I didn't like the title. I told the manager, I said, this isn't for over 50, this is for older people. He said, I want it to be. I said, okay. So I would open the show saying, this is over 50, for people 60, 70, and but we did find, when you're doing a story on nursing homes, on retirement, on the interest came principally, or at least as much, from the children of these 70 and 80-year-olds.
Wondering how to do what they didn't know what to do.
How can we help them to make their decision?
Gene, how did you get involved in so many commercials?
I guess when I was auditioning in New York, I met a lot of agents, So even after I got the job in Philadelphia, I would go over to New York, and I did some good commercials there for a while. And maybe that was part of it, or maybe the fact that I just was myself when I did a commercial, that I did a lot of them. And a lot of them were for Acme Markets, which will take us to another story. I did that show I just described with the cook lady, and when I say that, these are because I forget the names.
Don't worry about the names.
Yeah. And I did other commercials for them, and one day, this would be maybe in the early 60s, mid-60s maybe, they wanted me to be their spokesman. And I knew I couldn't do both. And I went upstairs, and I was sure the manager was going to say, "No, Gene, you can't do that." He said, "Well, if you want, you can't do any programs for us. You'll still be an announcer. Try it for 13 weeks, and let's see what happens." 9 years later, and this was wonderful, because Acme had 4 markets, and their commercials were different in it was like having 4 commercials.
Sure.
They were in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Washington, Baltimore, and we did a lot of traveling to them too. So my work for WCAU, I'd come in the morning at about 6:30, make a stack of cartridges, and I was finished. The rest of my time was with them. And I didn't really, okay, now I'll get into another area. I had a lot of time, and when you're doing commercials, you're not working every day, except when we went out of town, of course. And so I started doing syndication. I wrote 3-4 syndication for radio and got a catalog of the list of all the radio stations, and I made a few bucks, but it was fun doing it. The first one was crazy. I must have been out of my mind. It was called Revolutionary Woman, and I proposed to do 90 women in this, stories of women, the lives of, and I ran pretty tight after about 45 or 50. I was really struggling. And it took so long that I didn't get to sell it as early as I should have, because that would have been the most successful. But I did get some. I did one called Take My Word, which was the origin of expressions like between the devil and the deep blue sea. And then I had one which was a do-it-yourself, how to do things, how to make Windex at home, how to, and then there was one which was a repair type thing, how to fix it. I can't think of the name. But at any rate, friends of mine, and you must have known both of them, Schwartz and isn't it terrible when you met? And the guy who was our sales manager at CAU, Pixan's husband. Boy, it's tough. You get to be 95, there are lapses. But any place, they had a production studio, and they asked me to produce 2 of these on television. And so I was really quite busy. The little bit of time I spent with CAU, the time I spent with the Acme Markets, and the time I was spending with my own stuff, my own production.
I think people would really be curious to find out how you got the job as the mayor of Philadelphia and Rocky.
They were shooting Rocky I, the very first one, and they were somewhere in Center City, and I ran into the production. They were shooting some kind of a production, and the cameraman introduced me to the agent. Turned out to be a woman who was born and raised in Philadelphia. Said, "Oh my God, Gene Crane, how are you?" She said, "Would you like to do some work?" Absolutely, no question about it. And it wasn't more than, I think Rocky III was less than 2 years later. He was producing them very quickly. And I got a call. Well, the first question was, how tall are you? They were very careful not to have a guy who was taller than Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone.
Which really didn't make any difference because I was up on a podium and they were all down here. But it was just great fun. But maybe 27 seconds. but it made me famous in Philadelphia.
That's what I was thinking. You
Oh,
weren't
people
on that
were,
long, but
"Good
people
morning,
all over
Mr.
the world know who you are.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor." Everybody would greet me. And I still get, and it's got to be 30 years, I still get residuals.
Tell us about your son, David.
I have to make this clear. Maybe $37, maybe 22. If it came from Albania, 2 cents. Yes, go ahead.
Tell us about your son, David. How did he get involved in show business?
Gene London was doing biographies of famous people when they were young boys. And David had always been interested in school, even, he was Santa Claus when he was in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And he was doing whatever he could do in middle school. And either Gene came to me or I asked him, "Hey, you want a guy who's really good?" And so David did maybe 3 of them. I don't remember, he did Thomas Edison. I don't remember who else. I had to get a union card for him.
That's great.
And he loved that idea. But he was doing this the rest was on his own. It's the only thing I ever did for him, really. Well, that's not true.
I'm sure you did a lot more for him.
Okay. When the bicentennial started, they had teams of troubadours going round and round to entertain people as they stood in line. I think they had maybe 3 or 4 groups. And I knew David could do that. And I knew the lady who was in charge of that, and phone call, and the next, So David was a troubadour in '76 for 2.5 months. But the rest was really, the real struggling was on his own. Mm-hmm. He was in a production at college at Brandeis, which won a prize and went to the Kennedy Center for a weekend. They did that twice. It was so good, the USO bought it and sent them touring in Europe for a while. So he was well into it.
Let me say this for the few people who may not know who David Crane is.
Oh,
David Crane was the one who created Friends and several other shows.
Well,
right now he's creating like 4 of them.
Right. He and his partner were the ones who created, and with a third partner were the executive producers of Friends for 10 years.
How proud are you of David?
How
proud are you of David?
Oh my God. If you start, I'll cry. I am just as he is of me, really. Because he knows how when I was Man of the Year, Broadcast Pioneers, he came in from California and made the most wonderful speech. I have that on tape. And oh yes, we are we don't see him that often. He's either off producing somewhere, but we are on the phone for 20 minutes to a half an hour every single week of the year.
What was it like being on Friends with your son being your boss?
Oh, that one. Well, first of all, I went there a lot. They started doing it, and it got hot very quickly by the 3rd year. And Channel 10 sent me out there to do interviews with everybody, mm-hmm. Which I did. And so I really got to know them all. And then we were going out to visit David and his now partner, Jeffrey Clarick. They are now working on everything they do now. David does now is with Jeffrey. Mm-hmm. So I would go to visit with David, and I always made certain that it was on Friday, production day, shooting day. And I do remember, I think it was in the 3rd season, and David said, "I want you to see the script." I said, "Geez, I don't want to read the script. I want to see your rehearsals and the production." Yeah. He said, no, look at the cast of characters. And it says, Man, Gene Crane.
Oh, great.
That was it.
That's fantastic.
That was it. And I say, but by then I knew the whole cast very well. Incidentally, LeBlanc was the one who was nicer to me. Mm-hmm. He would ask me, "Are you still working? Oh my God, how and what are you doing?" and stuff like that. And he, of course, is now he's the star of the Episodes series that my son David and Jeffrey have been producing for 4 years.
The bottom line right now, you are 95 years old.
On Saturday.
What is your secret? I'm dying to know.
Well, I do jokes, because I think forgive me, that's the dumbest question in the, like I got a secret here on a piece of paper somewhere. So I used to, when I was doing personal appearances, scouting at churches and old folks' homes, and they was, what's this? I said, okay, 3 things you got to keep in mind. Number 1, stay healthy. Right.
Good point.
Number 2. No, it was sillier than this, damn it. Boy, you're taxing my memory.
Gene, everybody understands.
Yeah.
It happens to me.
But there were
I'm a lot younger than you are.
But there were 3 things there that
One is pick your grandparents, right?
Thank you very much. Select your grandparents very well. Oh yeah, okay, I got it now. Select your grandparents very carefully. Number 2, don't get sick. But then I would say, and I would get seriously, spirit, enthusiasm. The day you lose that, you've lost everything. And I, at 95, am every bit, well, you see it all the time.
I'm amazed all the time.
As enthusiastic as anyone can possibly be.
Tell the people what you do in retirement. How active are you?
Well, we live in Mexico, and we have a very social life because it's a wonderful retirement area, retirement community, but I'm still very active. My wife and I swim laps every week for an hour. She will permit me to divulge the fact that she's 85. What we do is celebrate our birthdays together now. This one was the 180th. 5 years ago it was the 170th, and I'm telling everybody,
what a great idea.
Hang in there, because next time I'm going to be 100, and she's going to be 90. It's going to be the 190th. We swim. I go to the gym twice a week. I still play golf, 9 holes once a week.
That's amazing. Just absolutely
And also
amazing.
we try to keep our brains very active. We do crossword puzzles for a couple of hours every day. We read all the time. We play bridge, so that you got to do all the things you always did, in hopes that this will keep you doing those things.
Do you have any major regrets about your career?
No, just that I started in the forestry school. No,
I never knew that. All these years that I've known you, I never knew that.
That's not something I talked about a lot. No, I can't think of anything, because I liked everything I did. There were times when I worked too hard. I remember a time in radio when I started at 5:25 in the morning and ended at 11:30 that night.
Wow.
Thank God it only lasted for 13 weeks, or I'd have probably dropped dead after a while. But even then, I was happy, because I was making a lot of money, about $135 a week.
That was a lot of money back in the early 60s, 50s.
No, I'm talking about 1946.
Whoa!
1946, yeah.
You make $135 a week back then?
We started at 44.
Wow.
I thought,
You were a wealthy guy.
when I worked up in Jamestown, that was 1941, that summer, and I had auditioned, and I arrived, and I was supposed to get $25 a week. And the guy said, listen, so-and-so hasn't left yet, but I can use you $18.75. I said, it's a deal. So those 3 or 4 weeks, I worked for $18.70. You could live on that then. I found a room for $6.50. There was a bachelor's table in a restaurant in town, $6.50. All your meals in a back room, a bachelor's table. Cigarettes were only 15 cents. Regrettably, I was smoking, and I have regretted it ever since. I still have just about 2/3 of my lung.
Back in the late 40s, when you first began on TV, did you ever dream that it would become the giant that it became?
Television?
Yeah.
Oh no, I had no sense of it then. In 46, after the war, because they were starting to test before the war, but it all stopped during the war. But Philco in Philadelphia hadn't stopped completely, and they were the first ones back on the air in 1946. And so I immediately, that's where I was going. I knew damn well I would. I made believe. I remember when we started in television, And I went up to spoke to the general manager, like he was my father. And I said, what do you think? Do you think I should switch over to television? Knowing A, if he told me no, I would ignore it. And knowing B, he was going to say yes. And of course he did. So 1948, in the beginning, the two staffs were together. But after about 6-8 months, it broke up and we had the radio staff. And that was
there
1948, and that was history.
Was there anyone in your past who really helped direct your career? Someone you owe something to? No.
No.
Did it all by yourself?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say this. In my career, when I first started in 1964, you had an unbelievably dramatic effect on me because you did take care of me because I knew nothing.
You were a copy boy or a writer?
No, that's when my first writing job was for you, and every day you would critique my scripts. And you had a lot of
Really?
marks. Oh yeah, you had a lot of marks all over the place, and it took me about 6 months to figure it out. But I'll never forget your approach. It was always as a kind, gentle mentor. You weren't very critical. You just said, this may be a better way to do this.
You're bringing me to tears.
It's
kiddo.
true. It's true. It's absolutely true. Or you would say, Bill, how would you tell that story to your mother or father? And I would change my approach dramatically. And it was all because of you. And I think if you weren't there, I probably wouldn't have had a career in television. So at the end of this thing, although it's all about you, I want to thank you personally for what you did for me. And I'm sure that you've done 1,000 things for 1,000 people in your career.
I put a couple of guys to work.
Yes.
I remember hearing the boss say, we need somebody about this. Wait a minute. And I would run around to the radio. That's where I did Jack Jones and also Bill
Henley?
Bill Henley.
So Henley owes his job to you?
Well, no, he was, when they changed, when I was a weatherman a lot. I really didn't know a front from a back, but I was a weatherman. And then it became so technical, the electronics. I didn't know how to do that. And they brought Bill Henley in to set it up for me, and then I did it. And this was also just about the time I had discovered living in Mexico, and I wanted to semi-retire. And it got to the point where I suddenly realized, Henley can do this, and I'll be able to, and it was to the station's advantage, finally, to let me become semi-retired.
As we end this thing, I want you to think about this. What do you want to say to those hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of people who watched Gene Crane for maybe 60 years? What would you like to say to that audience?
I loved having you as friends. You begin to feel, I can't say a part of the family, but you know that you have become part of their family. I remember one time, I can't remember how late it was in my career, I was at a nursing home or a retirement, and I suddenly realized I've got 3 generations. I'm not talking about a baby, a child who understood what I was doing, you know. And that is a very warm, and people never greeted me on the street. Well, Mr. Mayor, yeah, but other than that, never Mr. Crane. It was always, hi, Gene.
Gene.
Yeah.
That's because that's who you are. You're just like them. They loved you, you loved them. It was a perfect marriage. And I just want to say thank you very much for all the years you gave everybody in the Philadelphia area, and to be my friend for maybe 40 of them. I'm really happy about that.
Love
and
you,
happy 95th birthday, Gene Crane.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
knowing
Get ready
and
for the
working with you.
100th. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Will I
kiddo.
be invited to that 100?
Oh, you'll be there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, kid. Thank you very much.